So in a way, it is those at the bottom of the pyramid who are the ones who would be perhaps most concerned at the moment, given what's happening. The informal sector remains the big concern. But Dr. Beg, a quick word on the rupee itself. You've been tracking the rupee for years. Do you believe we should be concerned at all as we climb below 82? Or that, in a sense, is part of what's happening across the world, particularly in the United States? And India, in that sense, still better off than many other countries.
Right. So I don't think India needs to worry about on this issue as much as it would have had to worry about, say, 7, 8 years ago when the external buffers were far less adequate. Having said that, I think we're entering into a rather precarious time as the year sort of draws to an end. We've seen very large currency volatility among the developed market currencies, the pound, the euro, the yen, the Korean won. That is beginning to infect the Chinese currency. And as the RMB heads towards 7.5 to the dollar and beyond, I fear that a wave of competitive currency depreciation could materialize in Southeast Asia, and that could spill over into India. So we need to watch out for that. It's not just a question of whether one is relatively better than the other. It's also one's absolute well-being that might be at stake if there is a round of competitive devaluation around the world.
So how low could it go?
I wouldn't want to comment on that. I mean, you may remember, like 8, 9 years ago, I got in very big trouble by trying to forecast a level, which did materialize, but it was not a good thing to do. No, I think in this particular case, it's not about the fundamentals anymore. It gets overtaken by contagion from global markets, and whether it is 82 today or 83 tomorrow, it is one of those things that is not really a function of the fundamentals. It's very hard to actually call a level in that.
I just have a minute on the show. Dr. Basu, if there was one thing, one red flag that you want to flag off, you are much more buoyant about the way where India stands, but if there's a red flag, is there a red flag that worries you?
Well, obviously, oil prices are obviously a factor that can destabilize things. But basically, if the global economy is slowing down, it's very unlikely that oil prices will rise very much. I think one other point that I'd just like to make is that labor market reform is making progress in India, and labor-intensive manufacturing is India's potential salvation. So the labor market reforms that have been put in place, what I would really like to see is that they need to be notified. The reforms have been passed by Parliament, they've been signed by the President, but they haven't been notified yet. So once they're notified nationally, then you can begin to see a significant amount of investment in labor-intensive manufacturing that lifts up employment and generates really much faster growth.
Because, Ajit Ranade, the PLIs, the production-linked incentives are being seen by the government as its way of getting manufacturing kick-started, of taking the opportunity of a slowing China, of the United States in a way, in a bit of a crisis, and Europe certainly deep down in recession.
But Rajdeep, the fiscal allocation to PLI is like 3 or 4 lakh to a corporate sector which is already doing well, and we are not seeing that kind of investment, by SMEs and across the board. So I think the government will have to carefully look at how much subsidy further, because when it's given to large corporates, it's called incentive. When you give it to the poor, you call it subsidy. But it's a huge amount. So I think the year ahead is going to be, you'll be very careful how to calibrate the fiscal math. I mean, on one hand, we are saying the tax collection is good. That means the corporate sector is doing well. And you're giving them PLI in addition. Of course, PLI has to be very strategic. It has to be in sectors where we'll get good, robust activity. Just having 1 million or 2 million iPhones manufactured in India doesn't mean it's catering to 600 million market. So it's going to be tricky. I mean, this is a difficult year. The fiscal arithmetic is going to be tricky. But as I said, India's inflation growth dynamics is much better, in much better shape. And if we get, if we don't go fiscally much more, what should I say, spendthrift, we might actually come up okay next year, as Prasanji said, if the oil prices come down.